Hi, everyone. My name is Sherelle Dorsey, founder of The Plug, the smart reporting on the Black innovation economy. I am super excited to have with me today Ries, who most of you may know is the author of the Lean Startup Methodology. And so many of us have sat in camps and workshops learning the processes and the methods, and his work has just reverberated across entrepreneurship, startup ecosystems in Silicon Valley. And has a new company called Long-Term Stock Exchange. And I think what's really incredible is not just his prowess as an innovator and as an entrepreneur, but also the work that he's doing amid the crisis that we're dealing with today, and how he's helping entrepreneurs and thinkers and everyone kind of on the front lines helping to really push through and make these kind of hard decisions as we're trying to figure out what our new normal is. So Eric, again, super grateful to have you here with me to really share your story and your thoughts around crisis leadership for startup leaders. Can you talk a little bit more about your work and kind of the kind of new ventures you've stepped into, and kind of how this is also transitioning with some of the challenges we're facing today with the COVID-19 crisis?
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for the kind words. This has been a very intense period, not just for me, for everybody, I think. But I have a lot of envy of the people who say that they're bored with the quarantine. You know, they're running out of shows to watch on Netflix, or they too much time on the couch. Too many. I don't understand that. I've been busier than I've ever been in my life. I have, I have young kids at home. I have a startup to run myself, and then I have just thrown myself into relief efforts, medical PPE, stuff related to the schools being closed, the massive wave of hunger, and then just the public's incredible need to be educated about all these new things. You know, all of a sudden now we all need to know what it means to flatten the curve. We need to know what it means to do test and trace. We have to have an understanding of how science is funded and what we can do to promote the race for a cure and eventually a vaccine to the disease. So it's been a really busy time, but it's also been, a really inspiring time to see so many people stepping up to help. And very few of the people I have asked to help out with any of these relief efforts have said no. It's been a real outpouring of talent and resources going against problems. And the interesting thing about a crisis like this is most of the problems that we're having to tackle are not new. They weren't actually caused by the pandemic. They were exacerbated or even just brought to attention by the pandemic. And if you look, most of them, experts have been warning about these cracks in the foundation of our society for a long time. So I kind of view it as an opportunity, not just for each of our startups to flourish and do the best we can. Of course, that's important, but more importantly for us as a society to actually fix some of these longstanding problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really interesting as well for you to say, because there are so many challenges. There's so much information and data being shared with us on almost an hour by hour basis, and different charts and graphs, and everyone trying to find their place. And I think it comes down also to just basic human survival. It is, can I pay my bills? Can I feed my family? How do I plan for the future when I'm not sure what the future is going to look like? And I can imagine even just the levels and layers of responsibility for folks. Like I have a startup, and I have myself and my plants. And so in some cases I feel a bit guilty around, like it's bad for me, but it's also bad for others who don't have income coming in right now, or they haven't seen their stimulus check. How are you managing all the different facets of like you said, being a father, being a leader, and having to be responsible for a team during this crisis? Like, how are you internalizing that, and still allowing yourself to just, and I don't even know if you do, but like, I feel like some days I just grieve. I grieve the life that was once before this. But how is that managing for you?
Not that well. I'm not doing that well. I don't want to lie. I think we ought to be honest about this. This is a hard time, and we are grieving what was lost. I mean, all the projects that were supposed to launch in Q1 of this year, I have several that will not be launched now. That's a form of grief. And of course, that's a human loss and the toll, and just the consumption of all these negative headlines and the negative stories on social media, it's a very dark time in our nation's history, in our world's history. And we need to, I think it's important, first of all, to acknowledge that. I will say that I have found, and this is, I think, true in every crisis, being of service not only helps others, but it's a form of therapy for yourself too. Several of the people that I have tapped to work on relief projects have thanked me afterwards. They're like, I was actually like in despair and having anxiety and not sleeping before you asked me to work 24/7 on this new project. And I actually feel better because at least I'm in action doing something to help.
Right.
And it's an opportunity to clarify our values. We are we always put respect for people, borrowing from the old Toyota value in our founding documents for LTSE. And we always kept that in the forefront of our mind. And as the crisis broke, my job was to make sure the team understood that that means to be of service right now. People first. We'll deal with the economic fallout. We'll get to how this affects our business plans. There's a lot of things we'll get to, and there are things that are important. But right now, we need to look after the safety of the human beings who are involved in our broader ecosystem. Of course, our employees, make sure they're safe. We've got to work from home. We got to have, we put resources against outfitting our employees with work from home setups and helping them with childcare and online education for their kids and just taking care of our people first and foremost, but then not just our employees, our contractors, our vendors, our part-time people, everyone that we touch, our customers, our partners, to make sure that they're okay and that we're in a place of relative privilege because our company's doing all right. So then how can we extend that circle of empathy out? For companies that have platforms, they're non-employee platform citizens, take care of those people and make sure that they have the social safety net that would allow them to survive and thrive. Those obligations are moral obligations first and foremost, but they're also business obligations because the way that you treat people in a crisis reveals the true character of the organization that you lead. So if you think your customers, you can screw them over now and get away with it, and they're not going to remember, they're going to remember. The vendors that you stiff, they're going to remember. And if you're a vendor, the customers that need help with financing or that can't afford your product or that need relief in some way, if you help them or don't help them, they're going to remember one way or the other. So it's a really important time now to get super clear about what our values are and to act in defense of those values every day.
That's thank you. That's such a great point. I think about the challenge around feeling like, how do you do business when you know that there's so much suffering and challenge, right? It almost seems like opportunistic in some cases. We've had founders just talk about like, I need to sell a thing so that I can make money. But at the same time, placing Instagram ads right now feels a bit tone deaf. And so how do founders, whether they're just starting out or, they're looking at a very tough sales market. I know personally, I've had to completely change our financial projections just based on the climate, and we're looking at 18, 24 months of just the unknown.
Who knows?
And so what are your recommendations for some of these, smaller companies and leaders where I may not have a whole team, but I am working with vendors or I am, looking to target my customers in a way that's both empathetic, but also ensures that I am converting people, into customers to sustain my business. What are your recommendations around that?
Yeah. And let's get real about this. For company, like a lot of companies shouldn't exist and this crisis will be their end. Okay. Let's just be honest. That is going to happen. And for many of us, that's just, I don't mean to be a downer, but like startups fail. It's kind of what we do. That's kind of our thing. Yeah. So the first thing is like, there's no shame in it. It's all right. I think there's people who are having a realization in these moments that the thing that they were working on, they were doing just to make money and they didn't really feel a sense of greater purpose around it. And some of those things should go away. It's all right. But a lot of those things have the opportunity now to pivot into something that does have that greater purpose or meaning. The problem, but also the opportunity of a crisis like this is need is all around us. So, I was just talking to a startup that sells, I shouldn't say too much about it, rather, I don't want to identify them, but they have a product that could be useful for a very elite demographic. They were figuring out how to sell it basically to wealthy people to make their lives a little bit more comfortable. but it also has the possibility to be used to help, millions of people who can't afford that service with their mental health. And they were like, I guess we just got to go all in on the service business model. And we don't know if we can make that work. Will the numbers add up? Will we still be able to raise money? They're like, we don't know, but that's what this moment requires. Well, I would say that's what the moment required before, because selling something that you don't really believe in, that you don't think is actually making, like if making the world a better place is a joke to you, then you're not in the right line of business, in my opinion. And startups that don't have that missionary zeal to them rarely work. It's very hard to build a startup just to make money. You have to feel like you're in service to a customer and you care about what happens to them. So if you have that feeling of you're like, no, if you're hearing what I'm saying, you're like, that's not me. No. I love my customers and I really want to make their lives better. The problem is the thing I was selling them before was like travel, or I was working with an entrepreneur who their business was about helping people get travel visas in an expedited way. And it's like, well, not a lot of demand for that right now. Visa is not really the problem anymore. So that business is gone. What now? Well, what about serving those same customers in a different way? So this is where obviously Lean Startup has a whole taxonomy of different kinds of pivots. You can take the same customers that you were serving before and find out what their needs are now and address those needs. A classic enterprise sales technique in a crisis is people generally are no longer as interested in performance, much more interested in cost. So everyone's cutting back. That might mean they're cutting back their purchases of whatever you sell, but they're cutting back because they want to save money. Well, can your product help them save money in a better way? So you could maybe make that pivot in the sales strategy, or say, here's a way that my product can help you save money, not just make money. If you are dealing, so that would be, the same customer, different problem, a customer problem pivot, we would call it. But you might also say, you know what, no, this same technology that we were using to help people get visas, hey, you know what, that could also help them get something else from the government. So actually, let's take this to a different customer segment, same basic problem, but to a new segment. So we would call that a customer segment pivot. There's a lot of different ways that this can play out. And so for those that are still feeling that sense of meaning and purpose, it makes sense to make this adjustment. And I've met so many entrepreneurs who just dropped everything they were doing before and just said, my technology is somewhat useful now in a new way related to COVID. And we have to do it. I mean, I was just talking to a company that does testing. They're doing COVID testing today. And just let this be this, I'll tell the story briefly as an inspiration. They had the realization, they were a Bay Area biotech company working on something totally unrelated to COVID. They had the realization over the weekend one day that their technology could be used for testing for COVID. So they did some sample tests. They tested, say, does this actually work the way we think? They validated that it could work. Then they realized they needed a certain kind of lab that they didn't already have to do the testing in. So they searched all over the Bay Area to find a lab that they could use, which you couldn't find one that was available. But they had a friend of a friend in LA who got them in touch with the lab. So they found a lab in Los Angeles on a Monday. Tuesday morning, the CEO flies to LA. By the end of day Tuesday, they have a deal to take over this lab and use it for COVID testing. By Thursday, their entire team has relocated from San Francisco to Los Angeles. And I can't remember that by the next weekend, they are fully up and running doing drive-through testing in Los Angeles. Now they've done something like 20% of all the tests that have been done in the state of California. And
wow.
It was a very dramatic pivot, but they're sleeping fine. They feel like they're onto something. And, now they have 150 people working in a isolated facility in Los Angeles where they're able to scale up this testing and they'll be able to take it nationwide. And look, maybe that will turn into a huge business opportunity. And in the end, they will make a ton of money, more money than they would have made with the other thing. Or maybe not. Maybe just the relationships and skills that they built in this pivot will allow them to go back to their previous business when conditions normalize and then raise money for it and then go back to it. Or maybe not. Or maybe they will go completely out of business, end this entire period utterly bankrupt, and feel like, but we still saved millions of people's lives from the pandemic through our technology. Like, what more do you really want? So I would say go where the need is and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, I mean, we see that too with even the fashion industry, right? We saw Christian Siriano converting, his, factories and sample making spaces to create masks. So it has been interesting to see in a very public way these companies saying, hey, here's the capabilities that we have based on, how we're already operating, and all we have to do is make one or two pivots, and being able to, donate or, have some subsidized resources to help increase capacity, that kind of leadership and star power. And like you said, even if they go bankrupt, it's like, you will never forget that story. And that's the story you take with you into your next opportunity. So I want to kind of start digging into this values-based crisis leadership. And I think back to 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I was graduating from college into the middle of a recession. And I remember like just the business climate, what workforce looks like, even housing, education, and just that challenge around recovery. And I know right now, because we are like directly in kind of the eye of the storm, there's all of this sort of reactionary, gotta be quick, gotta think on our feet to really solve the day-to-day crisis. And so when we start to project and look, what happens when we're on the other side of this thing, and the way that our interactions on a day-to-day basis as citizens and as residents and as neighbors. I actually just met my neighbor last month. Like, we were never home. And so it was the first time where we saw each other. And I had to go to Dallas for a few days, and I like left tea boxes and toilet paper at their doorstep because I was like, I'm not going to use this stuff. I'm going to be in Dallas. And then when I finally got back, they came back and I had a plate of macaroons and some water bottles. And it was like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have known you all for the last 6 months that I've lived here, and just like connected, right? And so I see that already changing. But when we're on the other side of this, just the nature of our work, and I would think about the startup leaders, be you in a CEO role or you're an actual founder, and you're able to get through this storm and get to the other side. But there's other crises that we're not going to be able to anticipate. I think about what's happening in venture capital right now. Like, how do we start to navigate and think about what our leadership looks like? Because this won't be the only component of the crisis that we have to get through. There's going to be others that we're going to face. How should we be thinking about that, and what the new world's going to look like?
Hey, I hate to be the downer, but it's going to get worse before it gets better. I hope everyone understands that and really deeply internalizes that.
That's very real.
We don't know. We do not know what is coming. And my perception, talking to a lot of experts, is that most people in the public have a very inaccurate view of what's going to unfold, both from the pandemic, the health side of it, but also the economic side of things. And we got to look to history too. Remember, in 1918, the last global pandemic of this, that is remotely comparable to this, it was the second strain of the disease that was really the deadly one. And there was a huge second peak after cities and states started to reopen prematurely. So we got to look at the next couple of years as a very turbulent time potentially. And listen, I would love to be wrong. I mean, maybe a miracle cure will be invented a month from now, and this will all be over and magically we'll be fine. But like, let's not count on that. Let's be prepared for a really difficult time ahead. So we have to manage and lead from the point of view of really recognizing the fundamental uncertainty of what we do. But there's a reason why startups are the ones leading the way out of this crisis in so many ways. It's because extreme uncertainty is our native habitat. We cannot afford to have a management system that is based on projections and forecasts whenever we're trying to do something new, because we do not know what is going to happen. If you're trying to do something truly new, and you also say that you can predict how it will unfold, I say one of those two statements is not true. Which is it? So this requires us, just like it always has, to take principles, and this is what Lean Startup is all about: minimum viable product rather than maximum gold-plated product, right? Simple experiments. Don't wait. Don't wait. You don't know what the situation will be next week. If you can launch something this week, launch it this week. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. If you can launch today, launch today. And the good news is no one's paying any attention to what you're doing. You don't matter. There's a global pandemic going on. It's really difficult to break through with any kind of story. Well, that's going to be bad. That makes it hard to market what you're doing, but it also means if you screw up or you make a mistake, nobody cares. No one's even going to notice. So even more so than normal, you have the opportunity to experiment and take risks and see what works. And then the other thing is, you got to be looking for the unexpected bright spots. So of all the COVID relief projects that I have seen, I mean, I've touched probably personally hundreds of them in the last, I don't know how many weeks. Most of them have had no traction, and like they've helped a few people, but like haven't really gotten anywhere. But a couple of them just have been like lightning in a bottle. And next thing you know, boom, they've got an unbelievable amount of traction, more than the founders probably have ever experienced in their lives. So if you just give yourself permission to take multiple shots on goal, to try different things, to just see if it resonates with people, learn from that. Again, even if you don't make money in the short term, in the long run, those experiences will be very valuable to your career.
That's great. Thank you, Eric. I just have one more question for you. So you launched this podcast, Out of the Crisis. It really provides a look at how some of these prominent leaders such as yourself are navigating and tackling the day-to-day challenges with their companies and industries, dealing with this pandemic. Why was it important for you to provide this content and your voice as well to the kind of larger startup and business community at this time?
Yeah, I never wanted to like run a podcast, and I don't even really think of it as a podcast. I mean, that's technically the form that it's packaged up as, but this is not. I'm not reading ads and like trying to grow my media business or whatever. Here's what it was like for me is I've been on the phone basically nonstop every day since the crisis started. I mean, I've had days where I don't even eat. I don't even get out of my pajamas. It's just on the phone from morning till I put my kids to bed. It's really intense, especially because some of these relief efforts have been really dire, dangerous situations where we're racing the clock to help people. So, and I was also talking to a lot of people who were depressed and really despondent. And I was trying to figure out, why am I so optimistic? And like, why do I still have energy to push through these things? And I realized, wait a minute, part of the reason is, yes, these conversations are grueling. Yes, it's like waffles and Armageddon, right? Like taking care of my kids while in my ear, I'm hearing about how nurses are going to, not have the equipment that they need. So it's been difficult, but it's also been really inspiring. So I've taken all this energy and inspiration from these people who I've gotten to watch up close and personal doing amazing things. And it hit me one day, wait a minute, it's a privilege that I have access to these people. I know these stories. Most people don't. And then I was like, well, they're not going to have time to tell those stories. They're not blogging. These stories aren't on Medium. There's no time. Everyone's so busy doing the work. So what's a way that I could bring those conversations to light? I just thought, well, why don't I just record the conversations that we're having anyway, and I'll package them up in a way that people can listen. And hopefully that will motivate people who hear it, not just to help those specific projects, but to take their own inspiration to go and get in the fight.
I find them to be very relatable, even though you've had folks like Sam Altman and Mark Cuban, and you're like, okay, these are like super high power players, right? But they're also very human. And so the conversations that you're having there are so relatable to just, regardless if your company, is pulling $1 million or less or more, we're all sort of still here facing the same challenges. And so it really centralizes that, listen, we're all dealing with the same issue. We're all having the same fears and the same anxieties. And so I really, really appreciate the platform. Thank you so much for your time with us, Eric. This was very insightful and enlightening, and we are grateful and hopeful to have you back, with the plug again in the future.
Oh,
And,
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Everything.
My pleasure. Yeah, thanks. And if anyone's interested in getting in the fight, I'm sure you'll provide them kind of ideas and links. But I would just say, now is the time. It's someone called it World War V on Twitter. I'm not sure where I heard that. I'm not sure who to attribute that to, but I do feel like there's like a mass mobilization needed here. We got to be of service to each other. So thank you for helping me spread the word.